everyone, my name's Katrina Walser from Oliphant Cat, and I'm a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney in Australia. And welcome to my monthly podcast on the needles. So before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land in which I stand, the Darug people. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So it is the beginning of May 2023, and this is episode 20 of my podcast. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for joining me. It's a pretty standard knitting podcast, so we talk through my whips and FOs, as well as some just general life stuff and what's coming up next month. If you do find while we're chatting that you're enjoying what's going on here, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe down below, just because that really helps other people find the podcast as well. So I've had a bit of a slow month on the knitting front, and we can talk about why in a second. So I don't have a lot to show you today. So it might be a bit of a shorter episode again. If anything in this month's podcast looks unfamiliar, then make sure you did see last month's episode, because I don't know why, but YouTube decided that no one needed to watch it. So I don't think it showed it to many people. So if you're seeing anything, if you're a returning viewer and you're seeing anything and you're like, that looks like she's made a lot more progress than she's talking about, it's probably because you missed last month's episode. So go take a look and make sure you've seen episode 19 and then come back here and finish this off. As always, if you are looking for me elsewhere on the internet, you can find links to all of the places you can find me down below. There's a link to my Ravelry page, which is where you can find all my designs, as well as my Instagram account and my Ko-fi. If you feel like shouting me a coffee, that'd be really appreciated to keep the channel going, as well as a link to my newsletter. You get a free pattern when you sign up. So it's for a little beanie, and that's pretty good around this time of year, especially if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. So if you feel like signing up for that, the link's down below. And I send out a monthly newsletter with all of what I've been getting up to in there as well. So let's just get going. The first segment, as always, is On the Needles, which is where I talk about all of my FOs and whips. So the first finished object that I have to talk about is my shawl that I'm wearing. This is called Saba, and if you've been here for a while, then you'll know quite a bit about it. I've talked about it a lot, and so I finally got it back. Amelia and I went down to the Easter show after it was packing up, and it was pretty cool to see just sort of behind the scenes of them shutting down and what it looks like when the park is empty. So I did pick up my shawl. Here we are. I am really glad to have it back. It is still just as big as I remember, and I still don't really know how to wear it. So I may just hang up some hooks and display it on the wall here in my craft room. They did also give me a little ribbon, which is sort of fun. Well, actually, it's a pretty big ribbon. So I haven't gotten a ribbon like this since I was in primary school and doing athletics carnivals. So it's nice to get my second prize ribbon. If I manage to figure out how to hang the shawl up, I'll probably hang this up next to it. So that's a pattern by Needy Knits. If you want any details, take a look at any of the last sort of 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast. And also I'll put a link down below to where you can find the pattern and my Ravelry project, which has all of the details of the yarns that I used. The second finished object that I have is a charity knit. Now, quick trigger warning, the charity that I was knitting for this month is the Red Nose Foundation, who look after mothers and parents who have lost a child. So if that's something that you need to step away from or just skip over, then I'll put a timestamp here to where you can skip forward to. So the group that I'm in that does charity knitting, we choose a different charity to knit for every month, and it's like a little mini knit along. So it's a fun Facebook group, and I will put a link to it down below in case you feel like joining. It is Australian based. So the charity this month was called Life's Little Treasures, which is run by the Red Nose Foundation, and they are a group that gives clothing and blankets and things to parents who have had a baby too early and weren't expecting it and unfortunately lost the baby. So this is a newborn cardigan. It's sized for like a 16-week-old, which is why it's so impossibly tiny. I think my daughter has dolls that this wouldn't even fit. The pattern's called Paige's Cardi, which is provided by the Red Nose Foundation. And the yarn is just some stuff in stash. I was donated it last year by a lovely lady who used to do charity knitting, but she said it was too fine for her hands now, so she gave it to me. It is some sort of acrylic, so I didn't love knitting this, to be honest, just because this yarn's a little hard on my hands, but given that I have it and it was donated to me, it feels, I don't know, I feel sort of obliged to use it. All up, I timed it out of curiosity, and this took me 3 hours, and that includes a lot of frogging, so it really isn't obvious now, but in the balls, the yarn that I had felt like they were very different colors. So I had one ball that felt very cream with lots of little specks in it, and that is the yarn that I used here on the sleeves and then up to the sleeve separation on the body. But the second ball that I had was this very pink toned color, it felt like in the ball. So I decided to do a bit of color management, and I used the pink tone color here on the calves and for the rest of the body after the sleeve separation. But it took a little bit of juggling and a little bit of frogging to figure out exactly where I should be changing colors to make sure that I used up the rest of the sort of cream colored skein. And in retrospect, I sort of wish I hadn't bothered, because it looked very different in the balls, but it doesn't look different at all in the finished object. So, But even with all of that, it still only took 3 hours. So that's my little cardigan. If you'd like to get involved in the CAL group, then there's a link to the Facebook group down below. And if you'd like to knit for Life's Little Treasures in general, then I'll put a link to where you can sign up for that down below as well. So those are the only 2 FOs that I have, and this one's not even for this month, it's just a what am I wearing. So like I said, wait, did I say? I meant to say, I've just sort of lost my knitting mojo this month, and I don't really know why. I've had some personal things going on that just mean that my brain's not really in it right now, and I think the 2 projects that I have on my needles are things that take a little bit more brain power and a little bit of setup. So I think that's not helping me any. So if you have a solution or a suggestion for how to sort of push through a knitting slump, please let me know, because I do feel really weird that I'm making so little progress on the stuff that I'm working on. And I do think that part of the solution is to just put one or both of the projects aside and pick up something that I can just gain some momentum with. But I'll show you why I don't want to do that with either of these things. But that may just be the answer. But if you have another solution, please just let me know, because I'd really appreciate any suggestions. So the first whip that I have is the Poisoned Apple Top. This is a design by Lily Kate France, and I am knitting it in Bendigo Wool & Mills 8-ply luxury, and some mohair from Three Cats Yarn, who is my friend Mel. She's an indie dyer here in Sydney. So this is the mohair here in the front, and it was a custom colorway that was dyed for me by Mel. She did it to match the BWM yarn that I already had. So it's coming along nicely. Last time I showed you this, I think I had up to the sleeve separation just in the body. So since last episode, I've added the sleeves and the collar here on the top, as well as everything from the armholes down on the body. So this has been pretty fun today. This has been pretty fun so far, because I've learned a lot of new techniques actually. So on the sleeve, there's something that's called a box pleat, which makes this cute little sleeve detail down at the bottom near the cuff. Hopefully you can see that. And that was a little fiddly, but a lot less tricky than I thought it would be. I don't want to give away too many details, but there is an interesting section where you end up using 4 different needles at once. So that was quite interesting, but it was pretty fun. The other new thing that I did was that I added in the bust darts that they suggest in the pattern. So she recommends that if you have a fuller bust, that you add in some bust darts, and she does actually give the directions for how to do that. I have probably the opposite of a fuller bust. So I was going to skip the instructions for it, but then I figured I'd do it just for fun. I've got enough yarn to cover it, and I've been curious about bust darts just from a design perspective for a really long time. So I figured I may as well make some, given they were sitting there in the pattern, and I've been wanting to know how they work anyway. Turns out they're really straightforward, so that's good to know. Maybe next time I design a top, I'll put some bust shaping in, and hopefully that'll help it fit better for people with actually fuller busts. Other than that, the reason that this has been dragging a bit is that from the bust shaping down, in the pattern, it's very straight not straight. The rest of the pattern is very sort of simple waist shaping that just goes in to the waist and then knits straight for a couple of inches. And I explained this in the last episode, but those sorts of tops that are shaped to the waist and then cropped, they don't suit me very well because I have a very short waist. So the distance from my underarm to my waistline, I feel like is a lot shorter than most patterns suggest. So if I just knit to my waistline and then knit a couple of inches, it would be basically above my belly button. That is not a look that I'm going for. So essentially, I ignored all of the instructions from the bust shaping down, and I've just added my own. So it took me a while to get up the brain power to actually sit down and do all the math to figure out that waist shaping. So essentially, I've added shaping so that it goes into my waistline and then goes straight for a little while and then goes back out to my hips, and it's more of a full length top rather than a cropped top. At least that's my intention. If you are interested in how all of that works, do let me know, because I've been thinking about doing some videos around how to make clothes fit you better. One of the advantages of being a designer is that I understand how knitting and math work together, and I know all the formulas and things that you need to calculate stitches and gauges and things. And adding in waist shaping to a sweater or a jumper that doesn't already have it is some of the easiest modifications you can do to a top to help it fit you better. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please let me know, because the maths is really straightforward. It's just a bunch of formulas that you just plug some numbers into and then you get instructions out of it. And so if enough of you are interested, I'll make that video too. So the reason that this has been dragging, aside from the fact that I was having to do the math, is that I think because I had to do all that math, I'm just sort of generally unsure about whether this is going to fit right. As well as the fact when I did try it on, so I have tried this on, and it just doesn't fit as well as I was hoping it would. The material's a little thicker and stiffer than I expected, which is a bit silly because I have knit this yarn on this gauge before, so I should know how the material is going to feel. So I don't know why it just feels a little stiff. Plus the sleeves, I think because they're a little stiff, they're not puffing out in the way that I thought that they would. They're just a bit fussy to get to sit right when I put it on. So I'm hoping the blocking will help that a little bit, because I think it's just going to help everything relax a little. I do also think that maybe I'll redo the bind off on this cuff and make it a little bit tighter, because she does say in the pattern that if it's going to sit right, the sleeve bind off needs to be quite tight, and this is feeling a little loose. When I put it on, it just feels a bit baggy, so I might just redo the bind off as well. She does suggest a tubular bind off in the pattern, and I sat down and opened up the video tutorial that she provides with the pattern, and the first line of the video tutorial was something like, "This is a sewn bind off," and I was like, nope, I am not doing that. Because the last thing I need in my knitting life is any more sewing that I already have. So I know they look beautiful and I know some people find them therapeutic, but I just don't want to mess with the sewn bind off. So I used Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which is something that I use quite a bit. I might still redo it and go down a needle size on the bind off just to make it a little bit tighter. Or I might just not make it a stretchy bind off at all and just do a normal bind off. And that should tighten it up too. I know I didn't mention this last month, but this is being knit on a 4mm needle for most of the work, and then a 375 for the ribbing. So yeah, part of the reason why I don't want to put this down is that it's just not going to be usable for any time until about September if I don't finish it within the next couple of weeks. So I don't know, I could just put it down and pick it up next September, or I could just keep working on it and then not wear it until September. So we'll see. I think I'll probably just keep chipping away at it for now and use it as an easy project if I need one. And if you want to see any of the math before I make that video, then I detailed it all in my Ravelry project for the top, so I'll link that down below too. So the other whip that I'm working on is my porter cardigan / jumper. And the reason that I say cardigan / jumper is that the pattern is for a cardigan, but I'm turning it into a jumper. Now the yarn is Wool of the Andes worsted. The reason it looks so big is that this is a jumper for my husband. It was meant to be for his birthday, which is at the end of March. And then I said to myself, when that date came and went, that I'd try and aim to do it for our wedding anniversary. And that was yesterday. And I still haven't finished it. And I'm nowhere near to finishing it. So I'm just going to keep chipping away at it. And it'll be done when it's done. He's not in any rush, so I think it's fine. So the yarn is Wool of the Andes worsted. I don't know if I just said that. It's possible that I did. It's a yarn from Knit Picks. The colour is called Persimmon Heather. And I am doing this on a 4.5mm needle. It's coming along nicely. Last time I spoke to you, I think I was up to about here on this back panel. And so I finished off the back. It's so much fun when you get to this decrease section because seriously, it feels like you're going downhill. The rows just get shorter and shorter. And so I was like, yes, please, I will just keep going. So I finished this off at a knit night a couple of weeks ago. And I haven't cast the front on yet, but I sat down and figured out all of the math and stuff for it. And I am actually making a video just on this cardigan. So I detailed in there how I'm planning on changing the 2 front panels from the pattern into one jumper front. And so I will talk about that a little bit more next time whenever I do actually get to that shaping section. But the beginning of it at least is just going to be the same as the back up until about the underarms. So I do need to do a second piece that just looks like this, and then once I get to this front part where there's going to be a V-neck, I'll go into a bit more detail about how I'm making the changes and what I'm doing to alter the pattern. So those are all of my whips and FOs, and the next section of the podcast is always Off the Needles, where we talk about life stuff, sometimes knitting related and sometimes not. This month it's very definitely knitting related. So I'm going to just knit on my poisoned apple top while I chat because it is just a stockinette section, and I figure that if I don't start chipping away at it, I'm never going to get it done. So I need to work on this whenever I'm in the mood, and I'm in the mood right now, so I figure I'll do it. Hopefully the metal needles aren't clicking too loudly. If they are, I'm going to regret having done this, but we'll see how we go. So the thing I wanted to talk about today is knitting communities and making knitting friends. The one thing that has kept me going and made sure that I keep working on my projects is having a regular knit night to go to. So I have a couple of knitting groups that I'd have regular-ish meetups with. There's one at 3 Cats Yarn in the city. So Mel, my friend who dyed the mohair for this top for me, she hosts a regular knit night every 2 weeks. And then also there are a couple of other knitting groups that I go to that have meetups either once every 2 weeks or once a month. And that's been really good, just because I think with me, when I lose my knitting mojo, it's not just necessarily finding the motivation to do or work on my projects. It's mostly inertia to some extent. A lot of it is just feeling like I can find time to knit. A lot of the time, if I'm feeling a bit brain dead, I'll end up just scrolling on my phone or just mindlessly like playing a game on my phone, when I could really just pick up my knitting and go for it. And whenever I do actually just start knitting, I feel like I get back into the rhythm of it and just sort of go for it. So it's more at the moment for me about finding the time and carving out the time to actually knit rather than the knitting itself. And so it's really good to have knitting groups that I go to, because it's sort of forced knitting time, which is what I need right now. So that's been really good. Plus it's just nice having yarny friends to meet up with. So all of these knitting groups are things that I found since I moved back to Sydney, which is, when did we move back? In 2019. So they are things that I found through COVID, and they're friendships that I've made. Basically all of them are new friendships that I've made since we moved back. And so it's been really great to find that community. So if you are looking for something like this, I know a lot of people get a little bit upset when I talk about this sort of thing, because, well, people don't get upset. They just end up asking me how it is that I find these sorts of things. Because I do recognize that they can be hard to find. I know a lot of people have complaints that they do have knitting groups that are local, but a lot of them are in libraries and they're with a slightly older crowd, and so that can be a little bit, not off-putting, just it's not as easy to sort of fit into a group when you're quite a bit younger than a lot of the other people in it. So if you are looking for communities, I'd suggest checking out if you have any yarn stores nearby. A lot of them host knit nights, and so that's really fun to go sit in those sorts of groups and knit along there. And if you are a little bit shy or less willing to just sort of put yourself out there, it's a really good social place to be because everyone has a common interest. And so this is a tip that I picked up from another podcast. So Nitty Natty is a podcaster from New York, and she was saying that her general icebreaker question at a new knit night is just to say, "Hi, what are you making?" Because that's usually a question that goes down pretty well at a knitting group. The other thing that I'll say is that even without the in-person things that I go to, some of the things that I've been finding really helpful for keeping just sort of my interest in knitting going have been online knitting communities. So there are a couple that I'm in. Most of them are Australian, so apologies if you're not from Australia because these won't actually work for you. But if you're into Facebook, there's a big Facebook group called the Australian Knitting Community, and that's pretty fun because it's lots of people posting questions and posting their whips and FOs, and so it's really good to go there just to find inspiration and also just like chat to people about knitting, and also to get feedback if you're ever feeling stuck about a project or want to just talk about something that you're making. The other thing that I'm actually more active on that's a lot of fun is a Discord group called, oh no, Patricia's got to kill me. Sorry, Patricia. I'm completely blanking on the name. Anyway, it's just the like Australian knitting Discord. And because it's a Discord group, people I found tend to be a little bit closer to my age. And it's just been fun getting to know a lot of people. Some of them are people that I know in real life from the knitting communities that I'm in, but some of them aren't. They're just people I know from online. And if you don't know what Discord is, it's basically a big chat server. I don't hesitate to call it a chat room because there's lots of different rooms, but it's just a place where you go and have big group chats about different topics and things. And so that's been going really well. It's a really fun little group. So if you want to join either the Facebook group that I mentioned or the Discord channel that I mentioned, then I'll put links down below to where you can do that. They are both Australian focused, but Honestly, the way I found Australian Knitters United was by typing in like Australian knitting. So if you're looking for a more general knitting group or one for your own area, then just try that, typing it into Facebook and seeing what the group search shows up. And there's never any pressure with these things. Like, you can just go sit in a group and lurk for a while and see if you like it or not. And if you don't, just quietly exit. And if you do, start posting, and it's fun. So yeah, that's just my little spiel about knitting communities. If there's anything that you've been finding really helpful in terms of like getting going with your knitting or talking to people about your knitting, or if there are any communities that you really love, especially Aussie ones, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to find more. And it's always nice having suggestions for people. And if you are in Sydney, and especially in the North Shore region, and you want to find some in-person places to go to, then let me know, and I'll point out to you the things that I go to and some other ones that I know that might be a bit more local to you. Alright, so the last section of my podcast for today is What's Next. And this is where we chat about what I'm up to in my knitting life and what's coming up next. I have been working on finding new magazines to work with. Not necessarily new magazines, but just in terms of like pitching new patterns to magazines. That's a better way of saying it. And so I've been doing that a little bit. I have gotten some commissions, so I will have some patterns that I have to work on soon. And that's always a little bit of a downer for the podcast, because it means there's a bunch of stuff that I can't show you, because usually I have to keep those secret. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I am already sort of fantasizing about new projects to cast on. Like I said, I probably should just do it just to get my knitting mojo back up. So the thing that I'm most excited about right now is that Spotlight had a big sale recently. And if you're not in the States, if you're not in Australia, Spotlight is our big box craft store, one of two of our big box craft stores. And so I bought some yarn there. So this sort of pastel rainbow yarn was just too cute to pass up, because I do have a friend who's having a baby girl pretty soon, and I was planning on making her a baby blanket anyway. I was going to go stash diving, but then I saw this and I'm like, well, can't really say no to that. So this is Freedom, which is a cotton, and I'm going to pair it with this and make a building blocks baby blanket, which is a design of mine. I'll pop a picture of it on the screen. I'm really interested to see how it goes with the gradient variegated yarn, because I've only ever done this with solid yarns before. But I do think that it should be bright enough that you'll still be able to see the design, even through all of the different color changes. Now, my one hesitation with that is that I do know that I'll have to put it down before I can finish it, because I'm planning on adding the name to the blanket, and she won't tell me what the baby's name is going to be until it's born. But I think that'll be alright. I can just start it and get to the name portion, and then wait until the baby's born and then knit that and just finish it off then. So yeah, those are my next knitting plans. I do also have a bunch of other yarn that I can use. I think after this baby blanket, or maybe instead of the baby blanket, the other thing that I have in mind is a jumper for my daughter, made out of some very special yarn, but I will talk about that if I cast it on. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for listening and watching and spending some time with me. If you are new here and you have enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to make sure you see future episodes, either by pressing the button below or pressing this button right here. And if you want to catch up on past episodes, then all of them are here in this playlist right here. And other than that, I've been Kat from Oliphant Kat. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next month. Happy knitting!